Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to be taking this Testors 132 scale salt flat racer and converting it into a Fallout car. So as you can see in the background, this is kind of how the car would look if I just built it as a salt flat racer, but obviously I'm going to be converting it into a Fallout car. So my first idea was to take this Lego canopy that I had and kind of go for a similar look to the Chrysler's Rocket 69. But after reading my bits box, I found some parts that looked a lot better, and here it is mocked out. The roof and windshield are from a 124 scale Tamiya Euro Roadster, also known as a Mazda Miata or a Mazda MX-5, which are left over from a previous build. These turbine engines are actually TT Combat generators from the Sci-Fi Utopia line. So starting off camera, I took my rotary tool with a cutting disc and cut out a section for the interior, leaving just enough of a lip so I can glue the roof and windshield on. So for the interior, I went back in my bits box and found these rear seats from a 124 scale car. Unfortunately, I don't have many 132 scale parts in my bits box at the moment. Mostly it's just built up of 124 scale stuff. So as you can see here, as I'm test fitting, they don't quite fit, so I'm going to have to cut them down some. For this I'm just going to use my trusty jeweler saw. So next I wanted to cut out some wheel arches, and for this I just put the wheels back in and then marked out where the wheels are. So I had a guide of where the wheels would be. So I then took my hobby knife and then slowly cut where I'd made the markings. Now to do this you are applying a lot of pressure and you need to be careful what you're doing, because it's quite easy for the blade to slip and either you damage the model or worse, you end up cutting yourself pretty badly because these blades are pretty sharp, so be careful when you're doing this. And here's a quick look of before and after. So with the wheel arches cut out, I then decided to just glue the axles in place, just following the instructions. As well as adding a few body panels. Since I plan to put one of the turbine engines in the back, I just completely recut a new panel for the back because I had a load of detail which obviously I didn't need, and I can put that piece in my bits box for a future build. So after this I cut a floor because obviously this doesn't have one already, and then just use some masking tape to hold it in place as I glued it in place. So unfortunately when I left this to one side, some of the glue seeped out onto the wheels and kind of glued them in place. I did try and break them free, but because I was using poly cement which fuses the plastics together, as you can see here, it just destroyed the wheels. So instead of me having these wheels move, I'm just going to glue them in place. So now that the interior's got a flaw, I test fit the seats again, which show that I need to cut them down some more again. So with the seats now cut down to the height that I wanted them, I glue them in place, as well as glue the lower half of the seats in place as well. Unfortunately, because I'd already cut the partial shells off of these seats, I realised I needed another one, so off camera I made a new one out of some styrene and just glued that in place. I then go back into my bits box looking for a dashboard that will fit this, Out of the 124 scale ones and the few 132 scale ones I had, I ended up picking this one, which is from the Airfix Quick Build Spaghetti Veyron, which is about 124 scale. So as you can see, as I test fit it, I'll need to trim this down, which I just do off camera. Once the dashboard's trimmed down to where I'm happy with it, I then glue it in place. Following this, I then glue the TT Combat generators, or the turbine engines, to the back of the car, starting with the side ones and then the rear. So as you saw when I mocked the roof and windshield out, the roof kind of extends over the windshield, so I just marked it out, and here I'm just going to cut that off with my jeweler saw. Off camera I glued them together. Now usually I wouldn't use super glue or poly cement to glue clear plastics because they have a horrible habit of fogging up the plastics, but since this is supposed to be an abandoned car, I kind of want that effect. Usually though I would use something like PVA glue because it dries clear and it doesn't cause any of the clear plastics to fog up. So initially I did intend to fill this gap in the roof and the windshield here with some green stuff, but then I realised the piece that I cut off the roof would make a really cool sun visor and fit the 50s aesthetic a little bit better. So now I'm going to fill the gap between the engine and the body at the back here. For this I'm just going to use some green stuff. Now green stuff is a 2-part modelling putty. It comes in this yellow and blue tape, and you simply just tear a piece off as much as you think you're going to need, and then you just knead it together until you get a consistent green. So at this stage it's got about a 90-minute window of work time for you to work with. It's also very sticky like chewing gum, so don't get it in your hair. But seriously though, it's very sticky and it will stick to every surface. You can kind of stop this with a couple of drops of water, but don't use too much, although I've never used more than a few drops of water myself, and it kind of does stop it from being as sticky. So then begin to apply this to the model, just applying small pieces at a time and just kind of filling it in the gap. So it's at this point I realise I really should invest in some modelling tools, but as it is I don't have any at the moment, so I'm just using the end of a paintbrush and my metal ruler to do all the sculpting and just kind of model it in place and push all the green stuff into the little gap. After doing a not so good job, I leave this to cure, which they say is about 6 hours to do, but I usually leave it 24 just to be safe. So I come back the next day. And as you can see, I've got plenty of cleanup work to do now that it's hardened. For this I'm just going to use some sanding files and my hobby knife to clean it up a bit, although I just didn't bother filming this. So next I move on to painting, and for this I'm using Revell Aquacolors, simply because it's easily available at my local hobby shop, as well as the fact that it's water based, so it's a lot easier to clean up after. So for the base body colour I'm using Revell Light Blue. Next I'm going to dry brush on some Revell Rust. Now the trick to dry brushing is to have as little paint on the brush as possible, so as you can see I've got a little piece of tissue paper here where I'm trying to wipe off as much paint as I can off the brush, and then I'm just slightly dusting onto the model. The idea is you just build it up in small layers instead of just splatting it on there. You just want to put small amounts on and just keep adding and adding and adding until you're happy. Next I do the same with some Revell Bronze, which is actually German for brown apparently. But yeah, you can use light orange. Ideally what you want to do is when you use a different shaped brush and you want to only apply this to the top surfaces. This kind of looks like the surface rust bubbling up. It also just gives it a nice contrast and just makes the rust look a little different. Ideally you should use 3 colours, like a dark brown, a lighter brown, and then a lighter brown or orange, but I just use 2 because it's just easier. After this I paint the turbine engines with some Revell metallic steel. So next, for some stupid reason, I decided to paint the tyres matte black, and the reason this is stupid is because I usually do the tyres last, so I don't have to go back and touch them up, as you'll see as I'm painting other stuff. Following this I paint the underside of the car rust, just applying some paint. You'll never really see the underside of this, but it's nice to paint something there just in case there's a reflection or something. I then paint the hubs with this, which is again why I said paint the tyres was a stupid mistake. I then paint the interior with a Revell wood brown. And then lastly, to finish the whole model off, I just used a homemade black wash and coat the entire thing. Now at this point, I could say the model was finished, but I did really feel that I was just rushing the model simply to try and get it out in a week, which I've been kind of doing a bit stupidly the last couple of builds, is just trying to rush through them, try and get them out to, you know, feed the YouTube algorithm. And I decided to take a step back because I didn't like the way it looked and just focus on making something decent instead of just trying to get this out and then get to the next build. So I took a step back, realised it was lacking a lot of detail here and there, and then decided to go about fixing what I'd done wrong. So to start with, I decided I didn't really like the turbine engines on the side here at the back, so I took those off, and then went ahead and cut a tail fin to add more to the 50s aesthetic with tail fins and such, and glued those in place. I then went off and experimented with some different details that I can do at the side. So you can see this is the one side that I did all the detail work on, and then I'm going to tell you how I built it with the other side. So starting with the door, I took my hobby knife and just marked out where I wanted the lines for the door panel to be. I then took my file and then just defined those lines a bit more. So for the trim on the back of the tail fin here, I used some strips of styrene and just cut and glued them in place. I also did the same for the wheel arch, as well as cut a piece for the door handle. Next I move into the headlight. For the headlight I used some styrene tube and just cut that at an angle. Originally I was going to use some smaller pieces, but I felt it fit more with the Fallout 50s aesthetic if I used some larger tubing, because I've always found Fallout's vehicle design a bit quirky. And I just felt this suited a little bit better using bigger headlights. I also cut another piece of styrene strip attached to the top of the headlight, you know, to make the headlight trim a bit more defined, instead of just some circles that I cut. So for the tail fin, I cut another tail fin and then glued it on the inside and glued the two top halves together, and then left me with a gap, and I just simply filled the gap with some green stuff. I didn't really record this because you'd already seen me work with some green stuff. This is just before I sand it down and cut it down a bit more, so I do sand it down before I paint it. Here we are with the final build. I did paint it off camera just because I felt I'd save you from basically re-watching the same footage over again. Overall, I'm much happier with the way this turned out now, because I went back in and put in the detail instead of just rushing through. I think it really has that Fallout aesthetic down a lot better now. As usual, there'll be some glamour shots at the end here, as well as a little short animation with this thing. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one.